And once again, your mother is the witness for this document.
Correct.
Now, can we agree that these documents create a relationship between you and WCD that is more complicated than you simply being a real estate agent?
Yes, I do now.
You do now. That you're lending, or sorry, you're guaranteeing quite a large amount of money, $1.5 million in effect.
Yes.
And then you're becoming the beneficial shareholder of most of the shares of the company.
Yes.
Right. Now, I appreciate your evidence that your mother didn't read this and you didn't review it with her. But let me ask you this. Prior to getting into politics, your mother had been in business for 20-odd years?
Yes.
And she's a very sophisticated person about business concepts.
Yes.
And so if she had read these documents, she would have understood both that you were making a very substantial potential financial commitment to the company, and she would have understood immediately that you were effectively a shareholder in this.
If she had read them, yes.
Right, but these concepts are something that is well within her understanding to grasp hold of.
To grasp of, if she had read them, yes.
Right. Now, let me just pause and look at this issue of you and your knowledge of trusts. Now, I don't mind telling you I got a C+ in trust in law school, so we're more or less on equal footing here. But,
Oh, maybe I'd be a little less.
right. But you've been in commercial real estate for how many years?
25.
25. And I take it that from time to time you've run across a situation where somebody has bought land as a trustee.
No.
You haven't. Have you never had the situation where somebody is doing a land assembly for some project and a lawyer or somebody buys in trust for some other person?
For a corporation to be incorporated.
Right.
Yes.
So you're familiar with that notion. So you know that a lawyer in those circumstances doesn't own the land, right?
Correct.
Can't sell the land to anybody else because the land belongs to the beneficiary of the trust.
Well, the corporation he's going to incorporate.
Yes, in this example, the corporation's the beneficiary, and you understand that.
Yes.
Right. So that this notion of a trust is something that, in fact, you've been familiar with for a long time.
In the relation of buying a piece of property, yes. Not in holding shares.
Right, but you appreciate now, sitting here, that it's the
Today
same
I
notion.
do. Yes.
Right. That if I buy land as a lawyer in trust for a corporation, the shares of which are going to be owned by Ms. Rothstein, the land that I'm buying isn't mine. It's obviously Ms. Rothstein's corporation's.
Correct.
Now, let's look at Exhibit 197. Now, Mr. Gover reviewed this one with you, and I take it there's no issue between us that where it says in capital B, Leo 20%, so he's continuing to own 16 common shares of the corporation, that those shares he continues to hold for you.
Yes.
Right.
Now.
This is something that you now appreciate.
Yes.
And the Landplex company, I think we've covered this, is Tony DeChico's company.
Yes.
Now, after this document was executed, do I take it that Mr. Coupry's interest was limited to seeing that he was repaid for his investment?
Primarily.
Was he involved in the day-to-day affairs of the company after this?
He never really was involved in the day-to-day.
Right.
I represented him.
Right. So you were his place at the table.
Yes.
And from this point on, his interest is really in just making sure that at least his investment is repaid.
At least.
Right. And his investment over time was repaid, as I understand it.
The deposit money was.
Right. And the deposit money was the $750,000?
Correct.
Now, let me just spend a moment or two on the question of what it was that you were going to get from a successful transaction. So if the agreement of purchase and sale had actually closed and this project was going to be built, let's just look at some of these things. First of all, you had in mind that you would be the agent who would sell the condominium units,
Correct.
and you'd earn a commission on those.
Yes.
Standard commission is what, 3% for a unit like that?
No. On a condominium, maybe 1.5.
1.5. And so there were going to be something like 2,000 units over time?
I think there was 2,500.
2,500. So it may be a variance. If it's 2,000 at 1.5%, then the upside of gross commission for you is $3 million. Is that right?
It'd probably be more than that.
More than that. So if you go to 2,500, it would be $3,750,000.
I think it's more like 10 or 12 million.
More like 10 or 12 and 1.5%. Your math is probably better than mine, but
Well, it was a $1.5 billion project.
That's what the purchase price is.
okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, if we take, let's just take 200,000 as the unit cost. I've skipped a step here. At a unit cost of 200,000, which is low, at 1.5%, that would generate $3 million.
Yes.
And we can play with the numbers. You know, if the unit costs are higher, it's 1.5% of that. But your upside is actually in the millions of dollars.
Yes.
And you may need employees, you may have to split this and so on.
Correct.
But if you are the Peter McCallion Real Estate Inc., in gross terms, as you say, you may generate $10 or $12 million.
Gross.
Gross.
Yes.
Right. But that's what was in it for you.
That's what was in it for me.
Right. Now, in addition, you were going to get paid a commission on the sale of the land?
Initially, that's what I was hoping for, yes.
And you recall that one of the occasions in which we met was a cross-examination on an affidavit you filed in the commission?
Yes.
Now, could we give the commissioner and the witness a copy of the transcript?
Thank you.
So, Commissioner, by agreement with counsel, I think I actually undertook this on the record, that the evidence from the cross-examination, which was relevant to the proceedings before you, we would file. So this is an expurgated version of the transcript. So at question 57, I asked you, the question now was intended to make an obvious point that if the sale were completed and WCD went ahead with its project, that you would be paid a commission. Answer correct. Question, so that if the project proceeded to completion, you would receive a commission. Correct. Answer correct. Question, if in fact, if WCD purchased the property, you would receive a commission. Answer correct. The last question and answer, I think, are in error, but you're asked those questions and you gave those answers, correct?
Yes.
And obviously, you were intending to tell the truth that day.
I was intending.
And right, but today, can I just understand from you, it was contemplated that you would earn a commission.
In the beginning, yes.
Right.
But by the time the deal was signed, there was no commission involved in the deal.
Well, let's talk about that. Omers was not prepared to pay you commission.
Yes.
I take it remained to be negotiated with Mr. DeChico by that point whether commission was going to be paid.
Yes, and it's pretty
pretty
obvious he wasn't going to pay me.
All right. Now, the last point, of course, is that if you had 16% of the shares of this company and the deal had closed successfully with Omers and the project had gone ahead, the profits from that shareholding would have flown through to the company, would have flowed through to you, through your shares.
As of now, yes.
Right. Now, I wanted to understand a little bit more about the transition between Mr. Cook and Mr. DeChico. Mr. Cook according to you, was to head up this project to deal with the vendors. That was one of the things he was going to do.
Yes.
And he was going to deal with the approvals process with the assistance of the experts you were going to hire.
He was going to hire.
He was going to hire. And was it contemplated that he would also find financing?
It was a possibility.
Right. It's something that he would be looking for as well as you?
Well, we had the Koreans originally, and they had dropped out. So then we were going to have to find somebody.
Right. And so the issue going into 2007, the summer of 2007, was whether or not Mr. Cook was going to be able to find investors.
Yes.
Right. Or I guess whether you were either.
One of us.
Right.
Or both.
And from this morning, I took it that you were concerned that if Mr. Cook brought in new investors, that this would adversely affect your interests.
In the commission part of it, yes, absolutely.
So that the worry was that the new investors might have their own person in mind to sell these condominium units?
Correct.
And that person might not be you, obviously.
Might not be me.
Now, let's just think about this. If new investors come in and they say, we don't want to lend money, we want to hold shares, you were holding, as we now know, first 80% of the shares and then subsequently a lower amount. Can we agree that new investors who wanted to hold shares would dilute your proportion of the shareholding, whatever that happened to be at the time?
Well, at the time it was Leo, but it would dilute Leo, yes.
Would dilute Leo. And Leo was holding a trust for you.
For me.
Right. So that would be an adverse effect as well.
I don't know if it's adverse.
Well, you'd
have
have less
funding.
Right. You'd get the money, but you'd have fewer shares and your proportionate shareholding would fall.
I don't think I could finance 80% of a $1.5 billion deal.
So you think the deal was worth $1.5 billion?
Built out?
Built out?
Yes.
That's a realistic number?
According to Mr. Cook's projections.
All right. But the point is, I guess, to be taken from that last answer is that you were eager to get additional investment, and if your shareholding was diluted, so be it.
So be it.
Because what you were really looking for was to make money on the commission sales of the condominium units.
Yes.
Right. Now, we expect that Mr. Cook will come here and say that you had a conversation with him in the summer of 2007 wherein you said that you no longer wanted him to be your partner. Do you recall having a conversation with him?
I don't recall saying partner, no.
Did you have a conversation with him where you told him effectively that his involvement was being limited?
I believe that, yes.
What do you recall saying to him?
Well, I don't recall the exact words, but he was at the process of trying to squeeze Mr. Capri out, and that would adversely affect me, so we needed to find someone else.
What had he ever done? Give us a list of the acts that he had undertaken which actually had the effect of squeezing Mr. Capri.
I believe he wasn't paying any bills, which I believed he was paying.
So the examples we were shown this morning were bills from
Page and Steel.
Page and Steel, the architects?
Yes.
Architects
and
don't
Co.
work without being paid, I take it?
Not very long.
And there's this company, I think it's the ampersand symbol, and Co.
Yes.
What is it that they did?
They were planners as well. I don't remember exactly what they did. I think they were into conceptual design.
But the idea was that these people weren't being paid, and therefore investors had to be found to pay the bills.
Correct.
And then that had the effects that you've described.
Exactly.
All right. Now, so you then got Mr. DeChico involved.
Correct.
And I understand from you knew Mr. DeChico going back a few years when you'd held listings for him?
Yep.